want to start with you, Dispatcher, because this seems to be the most interesting story in the sense of timing and people being
You mean the biggest flop probably to have come out from probably the biggest stance of hype,
Yes.
preceding it.
Yes.
So NVIDIA and the 3000 series cards has released finally. I have myself not picked one up.
Shame.
I just bought a new car, so
Yeah,
I did that instead.
What car did you get?
I did.
You got a car?
I did. I got a Mercedes C43.
Oh, what happened to the green machine?
It's it was due time. Value came up.
Wow.
Value came value. No, the value came up on the car, so it was worth time trading it in.
Okay.
But I have not picked one up myself yet. The 3080s still elude me, and even if I wanted to pick one up, if you wanted to pick one up, you can't. They're tremendously out of stock and have been tremendously out of stock since about 5 seconds after they dropped at 9 a.m. On, what was it, last Wednesday?
Wednesday, yeah.
So there was no chance that hardly anyone was getting one. It was kind of luck of the draw of if you refresh the page and you happen to see the button that said add to cart. We had a couple people add them to carts and could not check out with them. Brent, you had a similar experience with PS5.
Absolutely.
So it was kind of an issue constantly that they weren't going to come in stock. But, for those of you who did get them, congrats. And then those same people started immediately having problems.
I believe there's a timeline you can walk us through.
Pretty much. There's a lot of different second-party manufacturers anyway that take the reference design that NVIDIA puts out and builds their own card layouts with different swap-in components here and there. But the idea is that certain testing specs that have to be met for it to be officially classified as an NVIDIA 3080 card based on whatever design that the second party company comes with to try to give them an edge, in selling their card. Like maybe the clock has been increased, or you've gone for higher quality components to improve reliability in the device, or whatever it is, Colorful being the first manufacturer anyway to generally kind of push the limits of what they can do on the cheap. Started reporting instability issues with an approved card from NVIDIA, but they did it unofficially. There was nothing public about this. They did it through their own internal email, or through their own internal email system. The first customers started reporting problems with the cards on September 17th, or just after September 17th. So like most of that anyway would see, it says September 17th started reporting problems anyway, which I don't understand, because September 17th, or was it 2 Wednesdays ago now?
I could have sworn they didn't go on sale until the 18th, but I don't know, man.
They didn't, but people got reviewers and whatnot got their product in order to review.
Well, yeah, this specifically mentions that no reviewer had reported the issues at that point. So, and it was talking about customers reporting the problems.
Regardless, it went on sale.
Right.
We know it happened. People are having issues.
There were so none of the reviewers had problems apparently with any of these, any of the cards that they were given, second party or the first party Founders Edition card. Actually, the Founders Edition card does not have any of these problems.
It literally launched on the 17th.
Yeah. So September 23rd, there was Computer-Based made an article on a crash to desktop issue, specifically videocards.com, the website that actually has the article linked in the description, or in the document in the description, had put out the first English report that I guess they wanted to spout that off particularly. But September 25th, Igor Walsek, who's well known in the overclocking community and the hardware community, publishes his first analysis, I guess, of the issue, and particularly identifying that a particular type of capacitor that's used for power filtering on the card for the processor to be able to operate at higher frequencies may have been the culprit of the issue. The reason is, I guess, across his testing, 2 different types of capacitors are used on some of the better made cards. So there
You
are
have pause caps, which are the cheaper ones, and the MLCCs, which are the higher end ones.
So actually, it's the other way around.
Really?
The funny part is and so like Gigabyte talks specifically. So videocards.com in the article, Gigabyte as the last manufacturer listed in their timeline here specifically talks about the fact that the MLCCs are actually a cheaper version. Like they are not necessarily more expensive than pause caps, and pause caps are actually supposed to be able to handle better temperatures, which is generally why they go with pause caps, but they can't quite handle higher frequencies quite as well. MLCCs are the reverse of that. So MLCCs instead, so pause caps are one giant solid state capacitor that gets put in place, terminals on both ends. MLCC style is 5x2 tiny little chips in a row. And if you look at the imagery of like even just the thumbnail of the image from actually Hardcore Overclocking, the second video in the video cards article, it shows that sort of setup.
Fire.
What's that?
It's on fire. It was a joke.
Exactly.
Keep going.
No, so the MLCCs are actually cheaper to put in place than the pause caps are. The difference is the MLCCs can handle higher frequencies but can't handle the thermals for it. So it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a trade-off, what one do you go with, in this sense, so a lot of the companies that decided to just stick with pause caps because they are cheaper, the pause caps are more expensive and supposed to be more stable, unfortunately aren't great at filtering out the power coming through for higher frequencies on the chip. And particular, the second article that I had linked about the Tesla's tested the NVIDIA new driver fix version, was it 456.55 the NVIDIA drivers anyway that sort of fixes this problem. Basically, it's a difference in the clock speed whenever it's being boosted in particular. So standard clock speeds work fine. It's when they start pushing into their own specified boosted range that pushes past the 2 gigahertz per core limit or line, basically. So the frequency in particular that PC World, the editor Brad Chacos from PC World had specifically had found that once it pushed to 2025 megahertz, that's when it really started to have problems. That's when it would have the crash to desktop issue. What would happen is the NVIDIA driver would encounter an error. I guess it was like a system lockup or some loss in the calculation. They still haven't quite rooted out the exact, I guess, cause of the problem, because even like the manufacturers specifically have said, look, we still don't quite know 100% everything here. We just know that this seems to work.
Interesting.
So, because what was it? Which company was it? I think it was EVGA said they had spent a full week of R&D just trying to figure out the cause of the problem. So they had gone to just swapping out the pause caps to MLCCs and redesign the board. They said that none of the EVGA boards have this problem because they all have MLCCs and pause caps mixed to get a good even blend, basically, to give you the reliability you need there. However, the review units that went out did have the full 6 pause cap array. So they are in the process of swapping all that out now, or have already done that, one or the other, to resolve that issue.
They were the only ones that went all 6. Either Zotac did as well, which I find interesting because the way they were describing the pause caps were that they were almost like they were inferior to the MLCCs. From a frequency perspective,
they are.
Okay,
so MLCCs are cheaper to implement, and the materials are generally cheaper. But it seems like that because of a thermal issue, pause caps are generally the go-to for that. Because if you want to push limits with frequencies, if you can get enough pause caps in there to filter well enough, then it's really not a problem. You push frequencies, you have enough pause cap, enough pause cap capacitor filters in place to be able to filter the power coming into the processor, that it's not an issue. Now I don't know enough about the circuit design to really say about like what kind of electrical noise you're really filtering out, as far as, you know, like instabilities and how that causes instabilities in the processor itself. But power needs to be clean coming into most of your processors. You know, your CPUs and your graphics cards, your external devices all need to have some sort of power filtering in place. And you can sort of control some variants of that based on how good your power supply is, whether you have a battery backup before your computer, and some other things that may affect that. But this seems to be a pretty good across the board. Doesn't matter how clean the power is, you know, like people are having a very consistent issue of this.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so you could put a line filter in, and that would probably help out considerably, I would think.
It would, but you know, if your power supply still does not handle the AC to DC conversion in a very clean fashion, or let's say you're getting dirty wall power because it doesn't maintain a proper 120 volts here if you're in the US or in North America, then you're still going to run into issues. You know, the battery backup's the only way to get a good, clean, like stable 120 volts. I said 120 hertz, 120 volts, 60 hertz. You know, out of your power supply.
Some people would say that you can't convert the AC DC because they go past that.
Shut up.
That was a good joke. That was a really good joke. Come on.
Come
on. I think what's
I
interesting.
actually don't even like AC/DC.
So
I don't either.
So here's the big deal. There was so much hype for this. This graphics card had
on this very show. We hyped it up quite a bit.
So much hype. We did.
But I was happy that the scalpers were getting screwed at first. I was like, "Ooh, you got what you deserve."
I mean, so not so much. I mean, supply is still a problem. I mean, like I checked today, NVIDIA still has them out of stock for the Founders Edition. And when I checked Amazon's page, it said currently unavailable for literally every type of manufacturer that produces a 3080.
I didn't realize how many manufacturers there were.
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
On top of that, the manufacturers all did it differently. They did it their own way. Like MSI had 2 rows of the MCCLs or whatever. Where's this freaking acronym, dude?
MLCCs.
Well, 3 should be the limit for acronyms. That's just my
MLCCs and versus POSCAPs.
Yeah, and it had 4 POSCAPs. And I was like, those people who did that didn't have these issues.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, you're lucky.
Well, well, so what seems to be the optimal configuration anyway was the configuration that I think it was MSI or Asus had gone with.
Asus actually ended up going with all
MLCC. Yeah, I mean, if you can control your thermals well enough through whatever heat sink source that you have, then that's fine. Because like the reference that used or the reference that everyone's is basing this off of is the NVIDIA reference card or the NVIDIA Founders Edition card. And the Founders Edition card has a set of 2 POSCAPs or 4 POSCAPs, 2 on each outside, and then 2 MLCCs in the middle. You know, so you get a good power or high frequency handling from the center. You get good power distribution and thermals from the outside. And you can find some sort of balance in between there, you know, so when the POSCAPs can't handle the higher frequencies, the MLCCs can kind of pick up the slack. And the issue is that this is the backside of where the actual GPU, the actual chip sits soldered on the end of this board. There is no room to add more. There's no room to, you know, really clean this up any further without a ton of engineering to redesign this further. And we're really working with NVIDIA to change their reference design to make this better. So
it blows me away how something so minute as this can cause such a catastrophic problem.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Whenever you're getting into the current age of electronics and the way that you know we build these things now is they are so microscopically small, and the type of precision that needs to happen with these is so tight on its tolerances that, you know, like if you're half a volt off on something, you know, which, you know, to most people working in electronics sounds minuscule to some extent. You know, if you see 12.5 volts versus 12 volts on your car, you're not really going to bat an eye at it. But, you know, if you see, you know, 3.5 versus 3 volts sometimes on some of these smaller electronics because your tolerance are so tight on the processor that it can't handle more than that or more than 3 volts. You can kind of run into problems.
Well, we've
now
talked
I'm
about
throwing
it
numbers
before.
out, but
yeah, we've talked about it before in the show of like the efficiency versus durability, right? Like as you become far more efficient, there are more moving parts, there are more things to make that efficiency work. So the second that something falls apart, and most things that are efficient have very few redundancy.
right.
Because in order to be efficient, you don't have the capacity for those redundancies. Like you're trying to push everything to the spectrum of its best possible, output. And so in this case, it's the same thing, right? Like the more efficient you get, here we are now with it. Okay, one thing fucks up, it fucks up everything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
I will say that if you want like that video that Jay's 2 cents that's on that same link is great at explaining everything involving all the difference between even all the different style GPUs.
Mm-hmm.
For those who need more information.
What's that?
I'm just talking. You keep going, Mark. Come on.
No, so like the individual press releases anyway are in the from the individual companies are in the article anyway. If you want to read through them, some of them are kind of interesting as far as how they're responding to it. MSI is very firm in saying we're standing behind our decisions for the 3000 series catalog, which consists of gaming and Ventus models. They use a mixed capacitor grouping, of course, so they don't really have these problems. But like these companies are all very much standing behind what they're doing, I guess, to some extent, because they have to. Like you got to stand behind the product that you make. Otherwise, you got to do the same thing that EVGA did and spend an entire week of R&D just trying to figure out how in hell this is actually causing the problem and what kind of array works for the type of setup you're going with. Gigabyte actually
they caught that early.
Yeah, like Gigabyte actually defended their decision to work with POSCAP capacitors in the sense that, and maybe they're tossing these out in the sense that they're using higher capacity capacitors that may have a better filtering property to them. But they're all, literally every company's also said, particularly in line, and Gigabyte said this too, of we followed, NVIDIA's guidelines on, like what defines this card, of course, well, the part of that is that, NVIDIA also may not know what kind of parts you're going to replace it with until that happens, or what kind of tolerances you're going to throw in. Not to mention you as the integrator here, the board integrator, are responsible for any kind of changes that need to be made to both meet the spec and push the limit of whatever you're trying to do with it and build out the hardware correctly to support that. If you want to push, like 25 megahertz out of your cores on the processor, then you need to make sure your capacitors can handle it. And the problem is that I don't understand how every company like that use nothing but POSCAPs out of this can't seem to find this, or so it couldn't seem to figure this out. So, because EVGA's response was, yeah, we didn't see this in initial, I guess normal testing environment for them, whatever, or what do they say here? During our mass production QC testing, we discovered a full 6 POSCAP solution cannot pass the real world application testing. How did you find that out during mass production QC? How did you not find that during board QC?
Yeah,
like you should have done that like on your first board that comes out printed. I feel like you should have had that figured out to some extent, or at least discovered the problem by that point.
I do find this fascinating because this is definitely a day where I learned something new, which was, I always assumed that NVIDIA manufactured all of the cards and sent them out, but that's not the case.
Did too.
They have the specifications that they send out to the manufacturers. The manufacturers put their own spin on it.
Right. The Founders Editions cards have always been, and I forget what AMD calls theirs, but there's always been a specific line that NVIDIA and AMD releases themselves to compete in the space anyway. And they're generally called, like NVIDIA always calls theirs Founders Editions. And up until literally this generation, the Founders Edition, or I'd say last generation, the Founders Editions cards have all been utter crap. More in the sense that their cooling is just awful. Clock speeds are clock speeds. They always meet their base requirements, whatever the boards are going to be. And buying from a third party or a second party integrator is always going to be a better card from a performance perspective because they're going to push the clock speeds higher than they normally would be. They may have a higher core count, whatever it is. They're going to base it off the reference design and push a limit, and that's kind of the point.
I think you just put a bird on it. It makes it a lot cooler. Birds are cool.
Yeah. Caw.
See, there you go.
Did I just make this podcast cooler?
Yes,
Nice.
you did.
Nice.
You need to peek next.
No, so it's interesting to see. I guess where like there some companies are talking about issuing replacements. Like Zotac actually put out a tweet specifically saying, "Hey, fill out this form if you have this problem. We're looking to figure this out." My favorite part is the second half of that tweet that says, "Meanwhile, for those who had purchased any Zotac Gaming RTX 30 series GPU, we will send you a box of Mooncake by Suncycle Malaysia. Makan Mooncake and relax, Sinya."
That was really cool.
I do find this interesting.
Hashtag we are sorry.
I do find this interesting because if most manufacturers follow that route, right, of like, hey, if you're having this, I feel like there's a way to really put scalpers in a vice in this situation where if you could provide proof of having this issue, but the problem is most companies don't want to go down that whole validation route. Yeah. They can.
No, I mean, you're going to have a serial number on the back of yours that determines what part of the line it was built in. And that serial number should give you the ability to just straight up return the product and get a new one. Now, if, as far as scalpers are concerned, if the product supply stays in the same stranglehold that it is in right now, then they may get the replacements before we ever get stock back, in warehouse shelves, which is going to still continue to be a problem. Now, I say a problem in the sense that those people are going to continue to hang on to those cards and then try to turn them out, on eBay. Now, if you just be patient and don't decide to spend $1,500 on a card that's worth $600, then you're fine. But if you're that impatient, then you don't need to buy them up,
I just also feel like we have a problem right now where there are so many issues when it comes to how we handle these. Right, we saw it literally with PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X/S, and now the NVIDIA graphics cards of scalpers using bots and all kinds of other dastardly means.
I mean, you're forgetting the OG scalpers of this year, toilet paper.
Yeah, toilet paper being another one. Now, it doesn't say I can't buy as much as I fucking want. Shut up.
I watched that lady buy all the boxes of napkins, toilet paper, paper towels. I'm like, what, you gonna wipe your ass with all this?
Just awful.
If you have to, I guess.
But I feel like this would be a wonderful case for manufacturers to be like, okay, you're having that problem. If they could come up with a validation that makes sense. The problem is that it's not efficient, right? Again, who wants to go through that?
Well, the problem or the thing is that based on, again, that serial number, they're immediately going to say, yeah, okay, you've got this hardware defect or you don't, Now, the other thing that could flip heads here, Zotac's trying to get everyone to fill out forms, but no one's saying actually that they're going to go for recalls yet.
Okay.
So the other thing too is, again, the second article I linked anyway, this sort of leads into the follow-up, is that NVIDIA did release 456.55 of its driver version that does fix this problem. And what it seems to do is it doesn't directly do this, but I guess it in its own manner reduces the boost clock capability of the third-party cards that are having this problem.
Yeah, it keeps them under 2,000 megahertz.
Right. To the point that actually the editor, Brad Chacos from PC World, was talking specifically about the fact that he couldn't even see 2,000 megahertz come back in again. Whenever he was in a heavy scene on Horizon Zero Dawn, which was sort of the reference that he was using anyway. They're in the test scene, I guess, that you use in Horizon Zero, or the benchmark scene in Horizon Zero Dawn. There's a part where the camera pans through a crowd, and that crowd scene is usually what does it, because that's generally when the card consistently clocks itself to 20-25 megahertz and immediately goes into a driver fault and crashes the game out.
Gotcha.
Because he even talks about going into the Windows system logs. And
literally watch the crash happen.
Identifying the display warning from the driver that says, "Yep, had to kill this program." Like there was an instability in the hardware or something like that. And as soon as it recovers, it recovers. It was pretty quick. So, it protected the rest of the system from crashing, which is nice. But it, of course, still means that there is a hardware issue that's happening with those cards. So, the thing is that at this point, if 456.55 actually solves this problem and you can still use the cards, maybe not to the full spec listed, they may still stick with this
spec. It's just not able to overclock.
Well, let me find the number specifically that he was using, because I don't remember.
When I was told, people were like, "Well, technically, it's doing what it said it's going to do. You're just not able to get the overclock that you wanted."
Well, so boost clock is a stated number too. Boost clock is a stated number too. So if you're not able to hit boost clock, I mean, technically it's still false advertising. So, and maybe, so I'd be interested to see if the manufacturers decide to say, screw it, we can meet base numbers, with the new driver version and maybe boost them up a little bit, but not quite to the full boost clock capability that we listed. And we don't have to do a full recall of all the products we've sold up to this point that are using nothing but pause caps if they have the instability.
I would just say you can have a refund if you want, and then
at a certain point, they can just change their manufacturing up to use 2 MLCCs like everyone else is doing, 20 technically MLCC capacitors like everyone else is doing. I don't see why they would be enticed enough to recall the product.
I agree, especially if they say, we'll give you a full refund if you wish. If not, the new details are listed below.
I don't think they'll even go so far as to say we'll give you a refund if you want. I mean, don't get me wrong. You have 30 days from date of purchase to return it generally to wherever the hell you bought it from. You can go back to Best Buy and say, "Hey, this isn't meeting my expectations." They'll take it right back.
Yep.
It's not a big deal for them.
I'm knocking on wood right now that PS5 comes in, no issues. We're ready to rock day one.
We have learned very well in this generation that early adopters do not do well.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing though. With all of these problems, with the fact that the cards are not available, and the fact that even if I wanted to buy one right now, I couldn't, and all of the issues that are happening, AMD's next generation graphics cards are literally right around the corner. The announcement is supposed to be in October. So
God knows they're going to be banking on this.
Why not wait?
Boys,
right? What's that?
Those are your boys, right?
Not from a graphics card perspective. I haven't had an AMD GPU in a computer of mine since 2013.
September 08.
08.
Yeah. No, I've run nothing but NVIDIA since that point. I was all ATI and AMD before that, but I haven't seen anything really come out of AMD yet that's really been worth it. NVIDIA is really pushing the ray tracing, dedicated computation hard.
This is really interesting while
we're in
the middle of the podcast.
So NVIDIA has really pushed the ray tracing the ray tracing dedicated chips hard, and has been pretty successful at doing so because it's actually been beneficial for developers and pushing the AI platform very hard. And AMD is very, very slow at this point to follow suit. So I'd be interested to see if the 6000 or the RX 6000 series that's supposed to be announced next month is worth it.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. And I'm going to be holding out for probably another month to see if those start flying off shelves too. So,
yeah,
they will. But please let us know what your thoughts are on the NVIDIA debacle. 3080, man. What happened with you? You were the chosen one,
up
as
here,
the memesters would say.
Up here, and then down here, and then just down here.
Anakin and Jude Law, right? I don't know. Please let us know in the comments below. But now it's time to move on to